Joining us right now from the LA Times, no stranger to our show. Consider him a friend and a great guy in the business, Kevin Baxter. Kevin, welcome, my friend.
Thanks for the call.
I really appreciate you stepping up and joining us to talk about the last 24 to 48 hours in LA Galaxy land. Omar Gonzalez off to Pachuca. I love this move for many reasons, for himself and his career, but also for the USA men's national team. I think this can only benefit them by him playing more and more and getting more confidence back. Your thoughts on that, Kevin?
Well, you know, I was thinking about this earlier today, and I know this is going to sound like a wild theory, but I'm kind of wondering if maybe the U.S. national team led to some of Omar's problems in the last year or so. And by that, I mean, I saw Soccer America called him the most dominant center back in MLS history. I'm not quite so sure about that, but I do know that when he came to the national team that Jurgen Klinsmann wanted him to do some things that he hadn't done with the Galaxy that he wasn't comfortable with. They wanted him to pass the ball out of the back. They wanted him to play the ball forward and not just kick it down the field. And Jurgen was adamant about that. And Omar had a hard time with that, had a hard time adapting to that. And when he would come back to the Galaxy, it seemed like he was a little confused about how he was supposed to play. And I think that led, he got beat on some really important goals. All center backs get beat on important goals. That's kind of the drawback of the position. But he seemed to be struggling more than he had been when he went away. And so I'm wondering, I agree with you. I think that that this is going to be better, that the change, the challenge will be better for him as a player. Whether it translates to him becoming a force with the national team again, I'm not so sure. But this is part of, I was told, speaking to the Galaxy this morning, I was told this whole Omar thing came together very, very quickly. And I see it as one of many moves that you're going to see over the next couple of days that may or may not land Ashley Cole.
Well, let's talk about that. The last 24 hours coming out of Italy, Ashley Cole's name is in the mix here in LA Galaxy, and I think this would be a wise move with Omar Gonzalez leaving. Bruce Arena is a genius. Bruce Arena is such an intelligent guy. He knows how to take care of positions that he has to fill, like Gonzalez leaving, the goalkeeper with Dan Kennedy, on and on. He's a magician. I think this is a good move.
Well, one of the things about the Galaxy is, although sometimes things come out of the blue, you always sort of hear the same MO from people who have talked with them. The Ashley Cole talks apparently are developing very fast. Ashley Cole, former manager, now is with New York City FC. But you keep hearing, and apparently I think it was, there was a couple at Aston Villa, for example, were in the mix. I kind of see that as a no-starter. I mean, why would Ashley Cole go to a team that's going to be relegated? So I don't see that that's realistic. But when you hear the Galaxy involved in these talks, what you always hear is the Galaxy have been very aggressive, and that's kind of the way they do things. When they decided they wanted Dan Kennedy, they went after Dan Kennedy. When they wanted Steven Gerrard, and Gio was someone they were tracking for years. So when you hear the Galaxy involved in the Ashley Cole talks, and you hear that they're very serious, I think then you can step back from that and say, well, I talked to Bruce about 10 days ago, and we talked through his off-season strategy, and what he was trying to do then was use the TAM money, which he had counted on, and then try to get Omar to sign a new contract, and he would have come in right about his base salary of $1.2 million from last year. All of a sudden, that blew up this week, and all of a sudden, Omar's gone. There will be probably another starter, another one of the top 11 will also be sent on loan to Mexico. That could be announced soon. This seems to me to be a way to clear money for Ashley Cole because the Galaxy, coming into this week, had nothing. They had no money left. They were really strapped as far as salary flexibility. So to see this flurry of moves, ones that weren't telegraphed that Bruce had not apparently planned on making, I think that tells us that the Ashley Cole thing is getting very realistic now.
Kevin, my concern with this LA Galaxy team getting ready for 2016 is, again, I think there's a big dip, a big discrepancy amongst, a lot of veterans and a very few young guys. I know they've got some coming up from their USL squad, but I'm still concerned that there's a lot of guys really up there in their 30s. I mean, Keane, all sorts of guys in their 30s, Gerrard. And I don't think they have enough in that, that 23, 24-year age, area to really make a difference. We know Dos Santos, if I'm not mistaken, is 26, 27. That's fine. But I think they need to get more of the younger guys in there to push the older guys.
And that kind of fits in. I mean, I think you can make an argument. I agree with you. And one thing about Bruce Arena is he tends to give young players chances, but he gives them, they're on a very short leash. You know, most of the guys that he's brought in there, you know, Jack McBean was the flavor of the month for a while, and then Villarreal, and he has Oscar Sordo on the back line, which, you know, he could be a guy that could come in and sort of help out, you know, fill the gap left by Omar, moving guys around. You know, AJ De La Garza can play center back, he can play on the wing. They do have some options, but you're right. And so when you look at you know, if you pick each position, yes, Gio's 26 and he has a 4-year contract, so he'll be there a while. Okay, so when Keane goes, what happens? Well, you got Zardes. That's why they needed to keep Zardes and not send him on loan to Europe. Bradford Jameson is a guy that they thought was going to develop into somebody. He still may. On the back line, you know, Dave Romney was a guy who came up from USL Pro and from Galaxy 2 and made some first-team starts near the end of the season. But that's not, you know, Bruce is very tough on defenders, in my opinion. And so he's not going to take Romney and just throw him out there. He's probably going to give Romney a few starts over the next year, but I'm sure that they're not looking at him as a guy who's going to take over right away. They let you know, Tommy Meyer go. They didn't re-sign him. That was unusual or surprising to me. Tommy didn't develop into the player they thought he would be, but, you know, I still thought there was something that they could get out of him. So you're right. They do have to start the transition. I think LA Galaxy 2 now is kind of running on all cylinders, and they hope to bring some talent up from that team soon. But you're right that there really isn't a lot of time to bring some of these players along. Robbie Keane is, you know, sort of kind of on his last leg. Dan Kennedy, the guy they wanted, he's 33. Now that may be young for a goalkeeper, but I think he has a lot of MLS miles on him. You know, they're going to have to bring another goalkeeper along at some point. So there's a lot of work to be done. And I'll tell you what, the guy who is loving all of this is Don Garber. This is exactly his what he wants MLS to be. He wants these teams to have to turn over every year so that no team becomes dominant. And Bruce Arena, because he is a genius, is the closest thing to having a juggernaut in MLS. But this is what Don Garber wants. You look at the Galaxy 2 weeks ago, and they look like they're bringing everybody back except the goalkeeper. Now they're missing one starter, could be missing another, may or may not be getting another international player to fill that hole. We're talking about it right now. You know, a couple of days before Christmas, we're talking about MLS, and that's what Don Garber wants.
And that's exactly what I wanted to close out with, Kevin. I think Don Garber has done an unbelievable, fantastic job, except for the Canadian player. We don't need to get into that. I think he's, you know, disrespected the Canadian player in many, many ways. But other than that, I think Don Garber has done an exceptional job. I mean, adding franchises, Pirlo coming in, Jovinko, Kaká. They are the talk of Europe. They are the talk of South America. You're going to see the Euro coming up where guys like Jovinko, guys like Chiman and Keane are going to be off playing in the Euros, and that's great for MLS. To me, I have only one concern of MLS. What is the next phase? We know Atlanta's coming in, another franchise in LA, possibly Miami. But what's the next phase? Do you go to an Oklahoma City? Do you go to a Tulsa? Do you go to Las Vegas? Where do you go next? Do you maybe think about Canada and talk to people in Calgary? Where do you go next so that this league can really quash and really, you know, say no more of the NASL? They're not relevant.
Well, I think that's a circular argument, to be honest, that it just goes around in circles and you never really reach a conclusion. I am of the opinion that there's been too much expansion, and Don Garber is looking at it and saying, look, there's a lot of cities that want to be in. They've got their checkbooks out. Let's take advantage of that. But at some point, the league gets a little bit too big and a little unwieldy. You know, when you have, 28, 30 teams, I just think that might be a little bit too much. I will say that I'm strongly in Don Garber's corner on the relegation thing. I know that's controversial, but I don't think relegation and promotion are going to work. I don't think the soccer pyramid is strong enough, and I don't think you're going to get people in Oklahoma City or whatever other city they expand to agree to a setup where, hey, we're relevant, we're on NBC, we've been relegated, we're on YouTube now. I just don't think that works out given the financial model of soccer in the U.S. And as Don Garber pointed out, the whole idea of promotion and relegation, that was in the 19th century when that started. We're not in the 19th century anymore. It's not a modern idea. So I'm with him on that. But I think they have to, you've seen MLS already start to soften on the hardcore salary structure they had. No, the cap hasn't moved, but there's all this TAM money coming in. That's a recognition that in addition to, it's a very smart recognition, by the way, Don Garber's talked about this. It's a recognition that the DPs are important, but the guys in the middle the next phase of guys who are worth, maybe $750,000, maybe $1 million. Those are the guys that make the difference between the good teams and the great teams, and those are the guys that are going to make the difference between MLS being a second-rate league and a top-flight league. And so he's recognized that. They're starting to pull the purse strings back a little bit, but I do think they need to manage that. With all the European players interested in coming, there could be a bidding war that could blow this whole thing up. I'm not sure we're at the point yet. We're going to get there very soon, but I don't think we're at the point yet where we can have teams bidding, in multi-million-dollar contracts with some top European players. I agree with you. The names that are coming over are great, and there are more names coming over to play like a Giovinco than there are Pirlo's and Frank Lampart's. I was very disappointed in Frank Lampart's alleged effort this year, and guys like Gerrard that are simply just don't have it anymore. You're seeing more Giovanni Dos Santos's and more Giovincos come over, and that's great because it's not a retirement league anymore. And the more those players come over to play and go back to Europe and tell them about the style of living here and everything else, it's just great for the league.
Kevin, I want to take this time personally to thank you so much for taking your time out of your busy schedule in all 2015 to join us here on Red Card. We really appreciate it. Love reading your stuff. Continued success with the LA Times, and we'll touch base again in 2016. Merry Christmas to you and your family, my friend.
Thank you. Happy holidays. We'll see you in the new year.
That is Kevin Baxter of the LA Times. Class act, a true gentleman, always makes time. Love having him on and talking about the LA Galaxy.